One of my all-time favorite painters, artists of the 20th century is Belgian surrealist painter Rene Magritte. Even if you don't recognize his name, Magritte's paintings have become some of the best known, most recognizable works of the 20th century. I'm confident you would be immediately familiar with them on sight. Known for his clean and playful visual style, coupled with what can only be described as philosophical wit, Magritte used ordinary objects, pipes and apples, bowler hats and clouds, windows and curtains, all of which he placed in unexpected or impossible juxtapositions, such that our expectations upon seeing them are upended, and our sense of what is actual is confounded. In this way, Magritte's art blurs the line between the image presented on his canvas and the reality we expect to perceive. A few years ago, I was at the Art Institute in Chicago. They were holding a retrospective on Magritte's work, and the complement of his surrealistic paintings was extensive. In one of his works entitled The Human Condition, the images are particularly arresting. In this work, the artist depicts a window looking out onto a pastoral landscape. Just in front of that window stands an easel. On that easel rests a canvas on which is painted a pastoral scene, the very same scene that occurs out the window. But then you notice that the landscape on the canvas lines up perfectly with the scene behind it. A painted cloud aligns exactly with a real cloud. A painted tree trunk merges seamlessly into its actual counterpart. And as we look at the painting, we are forced to ask, is what I am seeing the world as it is, or only a representation of it? Is what I take to be reality as seen through the window, is this actual, or is the painting of the scene I apprehend, in essence, is what seems obvious actual? By juxtaposing the easel and the window, each complementing and completing the other, in this way does Magritte invite us to consider if what we apprehend of the world is real, or whether we only think what we see is real. But in reality, we are being fooled by our lying eyes. These questions make Magritte's artistic work consistently compelling. But nearly 3,000 years before surrealism entered the scene, and long before modern art played games with human perception, the Torah itself, in this week's portion called Vayeshev, was already teaching us how unreliable our first impressions can be. In the opening verses of this week's portion, Vayeshev, we meet Joseph, beloved son of our patriarch Jacob, brother to 11 others. Joseph is described as a young dreamer. His brothers are described as not being able to stand the sight of him. And why? The Torah tells us because of how he appeared to them. Jacob, their father, gives to Joseph in Hebrew what is called a katonet pasim, or we know as a coat of many colors. In essence, a striking and distinctive garment. As a result, rather than seeing Joseph himself, his brothers see only the coat that is wrapped around his shoulders. They see in this favoritism. They see arrogance. They see a symbol and not a sibling. And so the Torah tells us they hated him, his brothers did. They hated Joseph and could not speak peaceably to him. Hatred is born not from who Joseph is, but from how they perceive him. In this way, Vayeshev insists on a truth that you and I know well. Our eyes often deceive us. We can readily confuse outward appearances for inward reality. And too often we take clothing as a substitute for character. Just as Magritte's surrealist images trick us into questioning what we plainly see before us, is the painted scene on the easel a replica of what we see through the window, which itself may be nothing more than a painting? And are we able to discern the truth hidden beneath the surface? So too does the story of Joseph. So too does that story, this week's reading, begin with a failure of perception. A multicolored coat is mistaken for the complexity of a companion. An outer garment is mistaken for the inner goodness of character. The tragedy of Vayeshev is that no one stops to see Joseph as he truly is. The Torah's point is this: we may see something, but understanding is not guaranteed. We may hear something, but interpretation is uncertain. And all too often, what we perceive is neither accurate, reliable, nor real. A number of years ago, from a rabbinic mentor, his name is Rabbi Jack Bemperad. Among much that he taught me, he offered this crucial insight, and I share it now with you. There are times we must quite literally learn again what we think we already know. For Rabbi Bemperad teaches that the heights of a spiritual life begin with becoming truly cognizant of what is actually before us. Sometimes we are looking at something familiar, but we must not just recognize it, we must recognize it, rethink it, re-understand it, and apprehend it in an altogether new way. Or in the Torah's terms, we must not rely merely on what our eyes see or our ears hear. We must learn to perceive again, to see past the coat, beyond the surface, to alter the perception of the projection and glimpse and actually see the person within. Rabbi Bemperad teaches that for most of us, most of the time, we move through the world seeing only the images we already carry of one another, hearing only what already fits our preconceived assumptions, the beliefs we already believe and hold to be true. And this is Vayeshev's point exactly, which brings us right back to Magritte and what is likely his most well-known painting. Entitled The Treachery of Images, this painting shows us a man's smoking pipe above the caption in French, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. It looks like a pipe, but you cannot fill it with tobacco nor light it. It is not, therefore, actually a pipe. It is the image of a pipe, and therefore, though we recognize it as a pipe, it is not a pipe. Yet we fall for this error of perception and cognition all the time. We see a photograph as a substitute for a whole person. We hear a familiar voice and assume it tells us the full truth. We believe our impressions, which are themselves fictions, we believe them to be facts. Magritte calls this image the treachery of images because of our propensity to confuse representation for reality, to substitute an idol for the ideal, to recognize what is but on the surface and believe it is substance. And what we want to be true, for what the Torah insists, lies beneath the surface of things, which is, of course, is exactly what we do with one another, and sadly, we do it all the time. How often do we substitute an overly simple mental picture of a person for the complex, multifaceted human being standing? How often do we confuse one's surface appearance for their substance and therein make the mistake of what is told to us, taking that for the truth of another story? Vayeshev interrupts our assumptions and says, stop, look again. You are not actually seeing what you think you apprehend. Or in Rabbi Bemperad's terms, recognize what is right in front of you, even if you have seen or heard it 1,000 times before. So it is that Vayeshev arrives today to wake us up, to say, do not judge by what your eyes take in. Do not assume that what is visible tells the whole story. Look past the coat, look beyond the appearances, seek a deeper truth. All of us know what it feels like to be perceived or to be cast in a false light. I certainly know this from my own experience, and I suspect many of you do as well. It is incredibly painful, especially when we are judged wrongly as a result. Someone sees us in a single moment and believes they know our whole story. Someone else hears secondhand information about us and then assumes they understand fully what actually happened and why. And by the same token, few experiences are more powerful than feeling truly seen. When someone recognizes our efforts, our sincerity, our kindness, our good intentions, our dignity, and the fullness of the complexity of our humanity. Being seen in these ways uplifts the human spirit and reflects the world of relationships the Torah urges us to work toward, a world built on truly seeing the people around us. Which brings us back to this week's Torah portion and to this very moment. For the story of Joseph is not simply a tale about a family in crisis. It is a story as old as time, about people learning to see one another more accurately. Let righteousness be our way of seeing, Vayeshev implores. Let compassion be our way of judging one another. Let humility guide how we understand each other. My friends, if we remember Magritte's lesson, that the canvas is not the window, that the image is not itself the thing, and if we can recall Rabbi Bemprad's teaching that we must learn to see again, to recognize what is often right in front of us, and if we are willing to hear anew Vayeshev's admonition not to judge others nor the world by what our eyes take in, or by the garments others wear, or by the stories we project onto them, then perhaps, just perhaps, by seeing beyond what we merely assume, we may yet bring nearer the future the Torah imagines. Amen. Shabbat shalom.